It really is a pleasure for me to introduce our first speaker today, Steve Koike, Farm Advisor for Monterey County, and I believe Salinas County as well, or Santa Cruz County as well, Steve, right, in California. And it really is appropriate for Steve to start us off on this symposium with Fusarium Wilt. I've known Steve, or known about Steve, for many years, and I was barely cutting my teeth in plant pathology as a graduate student at UC Davis. And Steve was already making plant pathology headlines in the Salinas Valley. We all know that coastal California is blessed and can grow almost any kind of vegetable. And so Steve has really had the opportunity to work on an amazing diversity of crops, many of which have Fusarium wilt. And a simple review of his long list of publications really reveals the diversity of his experiences. And so Steve brings to us today the depth of experience in this conference and perhaps begin these discussions. Steve?
Thank you, Barry. I may have a lot of experience with these diseases, but as our farmers will tell you, we haven't solved these things. I could give you a name for it, but I guess that's why it's a good thing to have these conferences so we can kind of work towards that end. So what I'd like to do in my brief time with you is give you a little bit of a picture of what's happening in California regarding this disease. A lot of you, I know personally, you have a lot of experience already, so this will be a review for you, but this will give you a brief update on the situation for Fusarium wilt of lettuce in California. And then hopefully that will provide a context and a challenge for the other speakers and for our discussions on what we can do about this challenging problem. So I won't dwell on it. I mean, everybody knows sort of what it looks like, declining plants, stunted plants, vascular discoloration, and you do get these very important crop loss figures because it takes out plants and these things are not ending up in the box. In terms of what's happening in California, the disease was first found in 1990 in the Huron area in Fresno County, and that was the first time ever in California, 1990. And it took a little while, but then it did develop over in the coast in the Pajaro Valley. Kind of a funny place for it. The Pajaro Valley is not even part of the major Salinas Valley area. It's north of that. And it's a place that's pretty cool. It's a place where we didn't think Fusarium wilt would like it because it's very cold, you know, even by our standards. So first finding in 2002 in the Pajaro Valley on lettuce. And from there it's escalating and we have this problem, and hence our interest in it as a state. 2005, we added a few more stars. First of all, it is escalating and continuing to be a problem in that desert, or not desert, but the Central Valley lettuce industry. Continue to be a problem in the Huron area. And then we started to add some big-time acreage because we found the disease on lettuce in the south part of Monterey County, in the south part of the Salinas Valley. So that would be King City down through San Ardo, a problem there. And then this is the situation today. As you can see, we have too many stars for our liking. Again, it is still a major problem in the Central Valley lettuce, but now we're adding parts of Salinas Valley proper. It's no longer just a South County issue for Salinas Valley. We have the disease in Salinas, in Gonzales, in Chular, places where we didn't think we'd see it because, again, it's fairly cool there. And the most alarming are the two recent findings just months ago. There's fields in Watsonville, which is Santa Cruz County. Again, very coastal, places where we would not expect Fusarium wilt disease to really thrive. And then for the first time ever, Santa Barbara County has a disease now, and that's in Guadalupe, which is close to Santa Maria. So you can see this is our current situation in California. Again, I would say too many stars. We do not like to see this distribution, and the fact that it's moving, so-called moving, and increasing in its importance and scope in the state. Not only is it increasing and moving around, but as you know, once it's there, we anticipate it'll be there for a while, right? Because Fusarium has the ability to make these chlamydospores or these resting structures, and that allows it to stay in the soil for an indefinite amount of time. And also you partner this with the fact that in California and Salinas Valley, we consider a good crop rotation to be lettuce, lettuce, spinach, lettuce, lettuce, lettuce. That's a crop rotation for us. Or, Mary, we get really creative. We'll do lettuce, 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 broccoli, lettuce, cauliflower. That's a creative one. So because of our industry, we're very lettuce-centric. We're really driven. You know, we have a great industry there. But that is part of the problem, right, is we grow so much lettuce, and you partner that with a resilient fungus, that equates to a problem. Now, a few words about diagnostics. Again, I know a lot of you in the room, you're very experienced, but we need to touch on this very briefly. In general, Fusarium Wilt's not too difficult to diagnose. It has the above ground decline, yellowing, necrosis, and then you have the very characteristic vascular discoloration. But I do want to point out there are some nuances to that, and we want to be careful not to make assumptions. Maybe it doesn't show up too well in the room here, but if you look at this with me in the dark room, you'll see that there are cases where the vascular discoloration is actually black. And for us in California, not so much in Yuma, I don't think yet, but for us in California, that's important because there's a very important disease that makes black discoloration, and that's verticillium wilt. And so there are cases, I could tell you from my lab, diagnostic lab experience, there are samples that come in that are in that interface of whether it's Fusarium or verticillium. You cannot tell by looking. And so I'm very conservative about that. I believe you should test all these things. If you're in the field and you dig up a lettuce plant and cut it open, I would argue with you that you can't necessarily know which wilt it is, and you take a little bit of a risk in just doing a field diagnosis without a culture. There's some other things that kind of mimic this disease as well. This is a fun slide I show my PCAs when I have a talk. We have a little raffle and we decide who can identify most of these diseases most accurately, these problems. But here are some supposedly lettuce problems that are similar to Fusarium wilt. And I would argue with you, if we had the live sample in front of you, it might be difficult to say, yeah, that's Fusarium wilt for sure, Steve. I'll bet my lunch money on it. You can't necessarily do that. So again, a caution about diagnosis. You must be careful with that. And in this day and age, it's so competitive out there. You farmers and PCAs, you can't be guessing, in my opinion. You should be really knowing what's happening. Again, if we had more time, we would have a little quiz here, but just a couple of these. This is systemic downy mildew, Richard. This is for you. Systemic downy mildew. It kind of looks like verticillium or Fusarium, depending on how you look at the plant. And this is one that is very commonly confused with Fusarium for two reasons. One, very nice vascular discoloration, and then the size of the plants. These are post-rosette stage plants, and Fusarium wilt does attack those young stages. This, though, is ammonium toxicity on lettuce. Okay, so be careful out there. A few other things. Again, these are pretty easy to separate, but I just want to show you and give you that idea that we should not assume, we should be careful. This is the soil-borne virus, tomato bushy stunt virus. It's a virus that's in the soil, and you can see that I would argue that there's some similarity to Fusarium wilt if you don't do more exhaustive examination. And I know none of you do the windshield diagnosis, right? None of you do that. You drive up to the field. Yeah, that's sclerotinia. That's Fusarium, and then you drive on to the next field, right? None of you do that. But if you do that, this is where you're going to run into trouble with some of these diseases that are similar. This is black root rot on lettuce. We can argue this is kind of out of that circle. I mean, it doesn't really develop the necrosis, but stunted plants early, you know, again, that's what Fusarium does early. So again, you have to be careful. This is the Phalaeopsis fungus that causes black root rot on lettuce. It's also an increasing problem in California. And another one that's increasing, very important this past year, Pythium Wilt disease. And this does look like Fusarium in many respects if you're not careful. So you can't do your truck windshield diagnosis in the Salinas Valley because you'll run across things like this that sort of look like Fusarium. Again, this is a Pythium disease here. So we can sort of summarize these things. I would propose to you that the above ground symptoms, if you look at the stunted plants, wilted leaves, yellow chlorotic leaves, and collapsed plants, I'd argue that there are a range of diseases that sort of look very similar, and that if you are going to windshield diagnose these without cultures, you can run into problems. You can run into a misdiagnosis. And again, I don't know how you feel about it. I just feel myself, you can't afford to be wrong these days. It's so important to have the accurate information. You need to know exactly what's happening. Now, of course, we can do the fallback position. If you're very careful and you work strictly with the vascular discoloration, you are left with two main diseases. So if you see true vascular discoloration, in terms of biotic diseases, you're primarily talking about Fusarium and verticillium. And thankfully for you, desert guys, you don't yet have verticillium, although we don't mind sharing our pain with you. If you would like to do some research on that, Barry, we can help assist you with that. Now, we're not here to talk about other Fusarium diseases, but I do want to point out, as Barry mentioned in the introduction, I do want to point out that I work with a lot of different Fusarium diseases. There are a number of others in the coastal area. I know you have some here as well. So there are other Fusarium wilt diseases of importance to those crops. And the main reason to bring that up is if we learn things about Fusarium wilt on these other crops, those may be lessons and that may be information that will help us with lettuce. And conversely, if we as industry research collaborations can make some progress with Fusarium wilt on lettuce, that will help the Fusarium problems with other crops. We may learn things that will bridge across these other crops. So this is just coastal California. Again, basically these all have Fusarium wilt diseases. I took the liberty to sneak in a couple here. Spinach does get a very important Fusarium disease. It is a Fusarium oxysporum. I'm not sure we could formally call it a wilt disease. We can go into that over lunch if you want. But basically we're looking at a whole range of issues on these crops that have Fusarium wilt issues, very important, and they're devastating, and they're there for a long time. It's the same profile as with our lettuce one. To add some final structure to this, and to help us kind of marshal our thinking, all of you, especially you plant pathologists, Tom does this in his classes, hopefully still, you do the halo disease triangle, right? That's how you define a plant disease, is by pointing out that all plant diseases are composed of a susceptible host, a virulent pathogen, and the suitable conditions that make that happen. I'd like to redefine this for the context of lettuce Fusarium wilt, and we can redefine the disease in that way too. So we're looking at the host. Lettuce, of course, is very susceptible, and at least in terms of cultivars that are planted commercially in California, we don't really have much resistance. We don't have a lot of cultivars that are resistant that are being used in California. So we have this circle here with the very susceptible host. We have the very virulent fungus, of course. It's host specific, and by the way, we should make this clear in case there's any confusion. You probably know that all these Fusarium pathogens, they're pretty much host specific to that particular host. So the Fusarium wilt on strawberry just goes to strawberry. The Fusarium wilt on celery, only celery, and the Fusarium wilt on lettuce, only lettuce. So here we do have a host specific Fusarium on lettuce. It does have various races, which their experts will talk to you about that later. And of course, again, it's going to be persisting a long time. It's going to be in the soil longer than you or I have our careers probably. So it's something that has to be dealt with very carefully. And then I've redefined environment in terms of location. Where do you find this fungus? Well, we know Barry and others have done work, very good work that shows it could be in the seed. And then, as I mentioned, a very important source of it is in the soil. It's in your fields. It's in contaminated, infested fields. And then the context for these two, these things don't kind of stay on your ranch, and they just don't stay in the county. And they're moved all over the place, both soil on equipment and seed and commerce. These things are moving around, and that accounts for, I think, this worldwide escalation and the increasing stars in the California map. So if I could have you take away this maybe from the diagram, is that you could sort of summarize our challenge and problem with Fusarium wilt on lettuce in terms of the following. That is, we have a host that's very important to all of us here, but there's limited resistance that's available to be deployed in the field. It's something that's going to outlast us. It's in the soil a long time. You have to account for that. And then it's going to be a dynamic problem. It's not going to stay in field X or field Y. Because of the seed and the soil contamination biology, it's moving around. It's going to continue to move around. I'll end my talk with you just to pull in another parallel. I don't know if any of you follow this in California, because we're not too big in strawberries down here, right, Barry? But not yet. But there's a very parallel situation with Fusarium wilt on strawberry, and I'll end by just showing that parallelism here. So in strawberry, Fusarium wilt is a very important problem, and its distribution in the state as well as worldwide is increasing. More and more stars on the strawberry map. Its importance is increasing as well. More and more acres are going down. There's more crop loss every year. It's increasing there. In terms of strawberries, there's very little genetic resistance. We don't have the resistant varieties to combat this problem. And then you probably know we're very famous for strawberries in terms of our methylbromide fumigation. That's going away. The chemicals available to control this pre-plant are becoming fewer and less effective. And the industry is saying that they need some help with that. Well, we could go through quickly the whole thing with lettuce too. It's increasing both in the distribution and importance. And in terms of field-ready varieties that are used and that are meeting the needs of the industry, that's very limited. We don't even have those chemicals available for lettuce. I mean, you're not really fumigating because you can't afford that, and we don't have chemical supply afterwards, so that's not really applicable. And I would say we're having this conference because we could say, yes, we need help together as a consortium to work on that. So Barry, I think that's it, and I'll turn this back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Steve. We have a minute for some questions.
Yes, in the back. Yes, the question is, can Fusarium come in the seed? Can it be seed-borne? And actually, one of the persons who's done the work is Barry. But yes, the answer is yes. I have not done that work myself, so if you want more specifics, we can have Barry address that or during the break.
But next session.
Yeah. Next session, he'll talk about the next session, but yes to that question. All right, thank you very much.